We're all living in a world of continual comparison to others, and leads to fluctuating emotions, of smug superiority or desperate insecurity. And the big question is, how do we stop measuring our self-worth by someone else's standards, especially when social media is the main way, especially a lot of young people define themselves?
Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Nick and I'm a software engineer turned investor. My goal and the mission of this channel is to bridge the gap between technology and investing. I am not a financial advisor and this is only my opinion. Please always do your own research before investing any money. I am planning to publish a full playlist on everything you need to know to start investing. That will lay down the foundation for your decision-making process later on. It will be the bedrock upon which you will decide how, why and what you will invest in. But while I was watching my daily dose of YouTube, the algorithm suggested a video for me to watch. And that was weird. It's not something that I usually watch. And even though I knew both of the participants of the interview and I don't resonate with either of them fully, I watched it anyway. And this is a skill you need to develop as an investor. It is so easy to wrap yourself in a bubble and only consume content that will feed your confirmation bias. But when it comes to investing, decisions based on feelings and emotions must be kept to a minimum. It does not matter if you believe in a company or a person with every fiber of your being. You must always listen to the other side's arguments, even if you just do that to solidify your own beliefs. It's okay to listen to a point of view that is different than yours, then analyze that information and draw a logical conclusion with real arguments that person is wrong, but don't dismiss it from the start. The reason for saying the things they say might not be valid, but some of the arguments might be. And failing to be aware of those reasons might blindsight you down the line and make you lose a lot of money. Even the greatest companies are prone to fail. Even the greatest people are prone to fail. I will not play the full interview. I will only show you the parts that I can fully stand by. But if you want, you can find the full version in the description below.
We're all living in a world of continual comparison to others, and leads to fluctuating emotions, of smug superiority or desperate insecurity. And the big question is, how do we stop measuring our self-worth by someone else's standards, especially when social media is the main way, especially a lot of young people define themselves?
Well, I think there's two things. The first thing is you should figure out who to compare yourself to. And I think the best person to compare yourself to is you yesterday and not someone else today. And the reason for that is you don't know anything about these people that you're comparing yourself to usually. Like, one of the things I've noticed is that it doesn't take much discussion with someone, no matter how successful they are. You scratch below the surface and you find that their life consists of trouble and suffering in proportions that you could hardly imagine. Almost everyone is dealing with some serious problem, personal problem, or problem in their family. Sure. And relative status, I mean, I suppose it's better to be rich and miserable than poor and miserable, but you know, the misery is universal. And so what you're comparing yourself to, if you're envious, it's an illusion, and it's not a helpful illusion. It's not a fair race to be racing against someone else, but it's a fair race to be racing against yourself. You could be slightly better than you are. Yeah. And that will actually, the thing about that's so cool, and I think the psychological literature really indicates this, is that slow incremental improvement from your initial baseline can take you places that you couldn't possibly imagine, and envy is only it's an impediment to that. And then it's an illusory impediment too, because those other people, they don't have it as good as you think they do.
The reason that this interview blew my mind is because most of the things said did resonate with me. I also do trainings with young people, engineers to be, software developers to be, and most of the information from this interview is similar to what I tell them to do.
If you want the future to work out properly, the sacrifices that you make now have to be real. And people understand that. I ask my students, most of whom are children of first-generation immigrants at the University of Toronto, and so pretty dedicated to their task. I say, well, what sacrifices did your parents make so that you could go to university? You know, and I mean, they moved countries. They left everyone behind. I mean, this idea of sacrifice, which is concretized in the story of Cain and Abel, is something that every modern person understands. But it's useful to understand it in an articulated way. It's so strange that you can bargain with the future and that it works. It says, well, I'll forego this gratification now. I'll take the harder route now. and the future will open itself up positively. And that actually works.
And if you don't do that bargain, you made the point that it always comes back to get you.
Yeah, and everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. Every undergraduate who procrastinates is guilty about it. They're torturing themselves, atheistic or not. There's no escape from this. You know, they wake up the night before, or maybe it's the night before their final, and they put everything off. They're sweating. They feel weak and, useless.
How do you cultivate acting better today for a more successful tomorrow? That is a challenge for a good sliver of the population.
Yeah, well, I would say humility is the key to that. It's like, look, if you have a child and you love that child and you want the child to develop, you set them a task that exceeds their current domain of competence. But you set them a task that they have a reasonable probability of succeeding at, right? Not complete, because then it's too easy. It has to be a challenge. And so you look at the child and you say, well, here's your ability level. Here's one more step you could take, right? Well, then you have to do the same to yourself. You have to take stock of yourself. That's a meditational exercise. It's like, who am I? Where are my flaws? And they're not going to be something you want to face. And then you think, well, what small thing could someone as flawed as me do that I would do that would improve me? And then it's humiliating, because you think, oh my God, really? I have to do something that small? That's all I'm capable of? It's like, yeah, that's your lot, man. And you better be humble enough to accept it. And then you make that small improvement. But then what you find is that small improvements, those things accumulate, those things compound. And you can start moving ahead very, very rapidly with a succession of small improvements. And there's a metaphysical element to this, but you know, it's also the basis of behavior therapy, which is the widest employed brand of clinical psychology now in the world. Behavior therapy. It's like, well, let's figure out what your problem is. Let's figure out what your goal is. Let's break down your problem until we have a small enough piece that you can address it successfully. Let's see if you can address it successfully in the next week. You can go out and try, and if you can't, we'll cut it down a little bit more. And let's assume that incremental improvement is going to move you up. And it does. But it does require that humility. And it's not a matter of comparing yourself to other people. It's not helpful. It's like, what are you doing wrong? And you can ask yourself that, right? And the problem with asking yourself that is you get an answer. Yeah. And it's not an answer you want. It's like, oh my God, really? That's what I'm doing wrong? How could I be so foolish and blind that that would be my mistake? And how can I be so little and useless that this is all I can do to improve it? You got to get, that's to get down on your knees in some sense before the ideal that you're attempting to manifest, you know, and to show where you are in relationship to that. But the upside of that is that it's an unbelievably powerful process. You can put yourself together to a staggering degree merely by ceasing doing those things you know you shouldn't do.
This is a good place to wrap up this video. But before I go, the key takeaways, which are applicable both to investing and to how you live your life in general, are: number one, don't fall into the trap of comparing yourself to others and try to be better than them. The path of success is to incrementally and constantly work to be better than how you were last week. When it comes to investing, that means you need to keep learning every day. Put in the work and do your own research until you feel you know most that it is to know about which company you want to invest in. Number two, work on having a strong mind so that you can delay gratification. Divide your spending into needs, wants, and savings/investments, and after you cover the needs, minimize the wants and maximize the investment part. Live frugally now for a couple of years to buy your freedom in the future. Last but definitely not least, understand that making money and building wealth should be a means to an end and not the end itself. You need a better, far more important end goal for doing that. A goal that when things go wrong and the market goes down will keep you invested and laser focused on buying instead of selling. Thank you for watching. Please like the video if you did and share it with your loved ones so that they can have a better chance of financial independence.